Let's go. All right. We're getting Vayigash. We're getting close to the end of the book of Genesis, and Vayigash, it's getting exciting because we have this wonderful family dynamic, and everyone knows how much fun it is to spend time around family. Yes, it's a lot of the blogs and news sites that I aggregate my information from are all going through tips of how to get through the holiday season with your family. There's a whole section about how to get through it and protect your waistline, and the whole other section is about how to get through it and deal with your relatives. And in particular, people are often apparently rather upset with the, shall we say, unsolicited advice and opinions that relatives will sometimes give them on their current state of life. Many of the blogs I read are for technology, and many of the people who read them are apparently quite young. And so the usual questions of, so what are you doing with your life? Are you seeing anyone? Are you getting married? Do you have any children? Why are you doing that with your kids? Why aren't you doing that with your spouse? Why? Sound familiar? Okay. And most of the answers to all of this are ignore it, divert the conversation, often with the helpful suggestion of pick on someone else in the room. Well, that's great, but Cousin Susie just met a new guy, and then watch the relatives drift over to Cousin Susie, which I thought was really unfair to Cousin Susie. Or to tell people it's none of your business and I don't care about your opinion, which is, a little... But we're going to see an example, although he doesn't know that it is, of Judah approaching his brother and giving him a little talk, giving him a little explanation, giving him a little lecture. And we're going to we're going to play on this theme of how do you talk to someone when you need to have a talk. So we're going to start right up at the beginning because of this very famous word that's the name of our parasha, Vayigash. So we're on page 274. It's chapter 44, verse, what do we start with? 18. All right, Harriet, I can see you're raring to go.
I am ready. This is good. This is going to be good. I want to hear what he has to say after what you said. Then Judah went up to him, Joseph, I guess.
Right, so Judah, let's make sure, hold on, thank you, reminding me, let's make sure we have the recap of last week's episode. Right, in last week's episode, we had Benjamin set up with the goblet and the cup, or goblet and the bag, and dragged back to before Joseph, who they don't know is Joseph, and Joseph's like, aha, I've got you, and you're going to stay here forever with me. And of course, all the brothers are like, we can't do that. What about Dad? And while they're all whimpering and crying and screaming and everything, Judah, Vayigash. Judah steps forward. Judah goes up.
And of course, has to step up because when they threw Joseph in the pit, not one of them whined and said, what about Dad? Never thought of that.
Very true. And however, someone did step up at that time as well. Reuven ineffectually, and Judah. Remember Judah's helpful suggestion?
Let's tell him.
What? Before that,
don't kill him, sell him to...
Don't kill him. Don't be a schnook. Sell him.
Get some money for this.
Exactly. Why should we be, happy that he's dead but poor when we can be happy that he's gone and have money? Right? So that was who Judah was 20-some years ago. This is who Judah is now. That was what he stepped up for in the past. This is what he's stepping up for now.
Then Judah went up to Joseph and said, please, my lord, let your servant appeal to you, my lord, and do not be impatient with your servant, you who are the equal of Pharaoh. My lord asked his servants, have you a father or another brother? We told my lord we have an old father, and there is a child of his old age, the youngest. His full brother is dead, so that he alone is left of his mother. His father dotes on him. Then you said to your servants, bring him down to me, that I may set eyes on him. We said to my lord, the boy cannot leave his father. If he were to leave him, his father would die. But you said to your servants, unless your youngest brother comes down with you, do not let me see your faces. When we came back to your servant, my father, we reported my lord's words to him.
All right. So what's Judah doing?
reminding him what he already put them through in terms of bringing Benjamin.
All right. So here's the problem, right? We've got Benjamin, and as far as Judah knows, Benjamin is guilty, right? He doesn't think he's guilty, but he has no way to prove his innocence because the cup was in the bag. So he's got Benjamin, and he wants Benjamin to go free. Right? That's his goal. There's a couple ways he can try to do that, right? He could attack Joseph. He could attack the vizier and try and, rescue Benjamin and make a daring Entebbe raid, and get out with Benjamin. He doesn't seem to be going that road, probably because they're in the middle of a giant palace and they are surrounded by the country, and that's an unlikely thing. And even if they got out, Egypt basically rules over the land of Canaan anyway, and they could simply walk in and attack everyone and take them back. So direct confrontation is not an option, right? He could, so we've got a couple options for getting him free, right? We got attack, which is not so good. We've got,
But I could say he didn't do it. I mean, try to say
exactly. We could go for the argument of innocence, right? He could have begun pleading that Benjamin couldn't have done this. He's such a good and honest boy. There's no way he would have ever possibly done this. There must be some mistake. Please allow us to pay for the goblet or whatever this accident that this happened. He could have gone down the innocent route, but he's not. Notice, however, the innocent route and the attack route, these are both confrontational, right? They are both attacking the person who has made a decision saying your decision is wrong, right? And I'm either going to attack you directly or I'm going to attack your opinion directly. That's not the road he's taking, right? He's starting off with a story. Well, how is this going to help? Right? Doesn't Joseph already know the story? He's the one who was the main character in the story. Well, let's see where he goes.
Later, our father said, "Go back and procure some food for us." We answered, "We cannot go down. Only if our youngest brother is with us can we go down, for we may not show our faces to the man unless our youngest brother is with us. Your servant, my father, said to us, 'As you know, my wife bore me 2 sons, but one is gone from me.' And I said, 'Alas, he was torn by a beast, and I have not seen him since. If you take this one from me too, and he meets with disaster, you will send my white head down to Sheol in sorrow.'"
Basically, you'll kill me, right? I'll die if Benjamin is lost. And what's Judah doing by adding this whole part in here? And so the first paragraph of the story, right, is that they were honest, right, and that Joseph, and they don't know that he's Joseph, but Joseph made them do it, right? So they were honest. You asked us, do you have a father? Do you have brothers? We could have lied and said no. We could have said no, it's just the 11 of us, or just the 10 of us. But we told you. And then you made us bring them. And what's he adding now in this section?
Well, his innocent father.
Right. Their father's feelings, right? And essentially, his life. Right? So he's not saying, this isn't just about Benjamin and us. Right? This is about our father. Right? So he's expanding the story to be much bigger than just Benjamin had a cup. This isn't just about this incident. This is about the whole story from start to finish, if you want to really understand what you're saying here by saying Benjamin's days. It's not just about a guy with a cup.
It's also interesting that he says, "These are my father's favorite sons," the one that was gone. He's admitting, I mean, that's hard for a sibling to do, to say, yeah, my father loves him a lot the best.
We noticed this? Remember the last guy that the father liked best?
Yeah.
What they do to him? Right? They chucked him in a pit and then they hauled him out only to sell him.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Judah is not glossing over the fact that Benjamin has become the new favorite. Judah is not pretending like, oh, everything is fine and it's just one of the other guys. He's like, no, this kid matters more to our father than the rest of us do. And I'm still on his side. Come a long way from selling his brother, hasn't he? Okay, so let's see where he goes with this.
Now, if I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, since his own life is so bound up with his, when he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die, and your servants will send the white head of your servant our father down to Sheol in grief. Now your servant has pledged himself for the boy to my father, saying..."
All right, so who's the servant in this instance? I just want to make sure we got
Yes,
this.
Judah.
Judah, right? So he keeps calling himself your servant when talking to the vizier. He's being very, very modest and humble in this encounter. Very non-confrontational.
"If I do not bring him back to you, I shall stand guilty before my father forever. Therefore, please let your servant remain as a slave to my lord instead of the boy, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father unless the boy is with me? Let me not be a witness to the woe that would overtake my father."
So what does he add here in the second half of this paragraph? Apart from his father's frailty and unlikely death.
They give himself.
Right. But he says that he made a pledge. Right? I made myself the guarantor. I am the collateral for Benjamin. So I can't go back without him. And as far as you're concerned, what difference does it make whether he's the one who's in your service or if I'm the one in your service? I'll be your slave. And you let him go. You still get a slave. You still get somebody punished for the crime. And Benjamin goes, and my father lives. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'll say.
Right? I mean, he could have left. It was very, very clear at the end of last week's parashah that Joseph, the vizier, said to all the rest of them, "Far be it from me to punish the innocent with the guilty, right? The rest of you can go. I'm only going to punish this guy." And Judah steps up and says, I'm not just looking to get out of here. He's got to get out of here and I'll stay. Come a long way, hasn't he? And we're going to find out that he convinces the vizier through this whole cycle. But really it's because of the story that he's able to show the connections and the linkage that are much bigger than just this one little episode, this one little incident. And he does this even though it means telling the vizier, you're wrong. And that's the hardest thing to do, is to tell someone else they've made a mistake.
Especially someone above you.
Especially someone above you. So we're going to look at a little bit of that type of...
also looking to see if his brothers have changed at all, because he has the power to punish them for what they did to him, if he should want to.
So Joseph, for his part, we're focusing mostly on Judah, so let's go ahead and get some Joseph stuff out of the way. All right, so Joseph, for his part, is absolutely orchestrating this entire situation in order to be able to test his brothers and rescue Benjamin. All right, no one should be under any illusions here. If he is able to get Benjamin away from them, and they say, oh, phew, at least it's Benjamin who's going to be a slave, not me, and they all take off back to Canaan, Benjamin's not going to stay a slave. Joseph's going to reveal himself to Benjamin and say, my brother, I'm so glad I rescued you, because clearly they were willing to treat you the way they treated me, and now we can be together. And, you know, what about our father? Well, that's a whole nother hypothesis of whether or not Joseph was really angry with his father or not angry, or didn't know or did know. That's a whole nother discussion. But this is really set up to both test the brothers and rescue Benjamin. That's why he was adamant for Benjamin to come down, because once Benjamin was in his domain, then if it was necessary, he could save him, which is what he's trying to do here. And Judah is making sure that it's clear that it's not necessary to save Benjamin, that the brothers will save Benjamin.
When Maimonides talks about how you know when you've really repented, does he go to this story as a proof text that given the same circumstances you make a different choice? That's the proof text that you've...
You know, I have to admit I can't remember which proof text he used, but I think this is a perfect example of a proof text. Whether or not he uses it, I can't say, but I think that you're absolutely right that this is a beautiful example of full tshuva, of full repentance, where you are in the same position and you have the capacity to do what you did before, which is basically sell out a brother, and you choose not to, through no coercion, but just because you feel it's the right thing to do now, as opposed to younger Judah, who thought it was the right thing to sell his brother. Judah has done tshuva. He has completely reversed. And the expression so much about his feelings for his father's well-being and his father's life and what pain this would cause his father really, really shows that he gets it now. And as we talked about a few weeks ago, it may be because he's now suffered the loss of children. And he knows what it is to be a father who mourns for the loss of a child.
I always have thought that scene when they tell Jacob that Joseph has been killed by him, and have to stand there and watch their father in such grief. I just cannot imagine how nobody steps forward and says, JK,
Just kidding.
He's really alive
Kidding.
somewhere.
We send him to summer camp.
To have to watch that is, I think, just horrible.
To put it from their perspective, they were wrong, but to put it from their perspective, they had watched their brother be fawned over by their father for so long, and their father allowed Joseph to lord it over their brothers, that they may have felt that Jacob deserved this feeling. I'm not saying, again, I'm not saying that they're right, but I'm sure that they felt that Jacob was responsible for Joseph behaving the way that he did, that angered the brothers so much, and therefore Jacob was really responsible. People are remarkably good at self-justification.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know whether you ever noticed that about human beings, but we're really quite talented when it comes to rationalizing our own behavior and shifting the blame to someone else.
Yeah.
So I agree. From the outside, how could you stand there and watch the grief and the years tick by, knowing that he is in such sorrow? Because he never gets over it. I mean, you can hear when he talks about Benjamin, much of the reason why he is so protective of Benjamin is precisely because of the loss of Joseph. Yet they never break down and say, you know, we got to tell you something.
Right, yeah. He could be.
He could be. He could be. Although in the Midrash, they do have the brothers searching the city when they first come into Egypt, trying to see if they could find Joseph. It's a very interesting Midrash for another time. All right, but let's get back to Judah. Commentary. Right, so this is from the Tosefta.
What is the reason why Judah merited the kingship of Israel?
Right, very standard midrashic question, which is if a character or his descendants later on receive some boon or prize, why? Right, well, why did they deserve that? And we just have to flip back a few pages to try and figure it out, says the midrashic mind. And this is one of a series of answers of why Judah merits it. One of the other answers, by the way, is the story of Judah and Tamar, which we talked about before. This is another in that same list.
Because of humility, as it is said, and now your servant, Judah, will become a slave to my master, Joseph, instead of the boy.
Right, so why did he become king? Why did he merit to become king? Because he saw himself as being a servant and was willing to be a slave to help someone else. Think about that as a definition for a king, for a ruler. Right? If you want to be a king, if you want to be a ruler, you have to be willing to be a slave to the people. Be nice if there were more rulers who thought that way, which is what the Midrash is trying to draw to attention. By the way, in case you think it is always good to be king, there was a very interesting new study that came out that said being the ruler of a country on average will take 2 to 3 years off your life expectancy. They did a comparison between people who were running and didn't win and people who ran and did win, and they found that your life expectancy, all of the things being equal, give or take assassinations and coups, goes down just by the strain of being the ruler.
You can see it in people's inaugural pictures
yes.
when they leave office.
Yes.
Even 2 years later,
Yeah.
the inauguration, you can see the stress.
The grays.
It is a heavy job anywhere in the world, but yes, we see it within our own leaders very, very clearly. All right, so that's one thing to Judah's praise. He was willing to be a slave. He was willing to serve in order to free Benjamin. But on the other hand, he kind of got himself into this position, didn't he? Right?
My son, if you become surety for your neighbor, if you have struck your hands for a stranger, you are snared by the words of your mouth. You are caught by the words of your mouth. Do this now, my son, and deliver yourself.
All right, so Book of Proverbs, basically saying if you become a pledge on behalf of someone else, right? If you make a deal on behalf of someone else, you're stuck. That's what Judah did, right? He told his dad, cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. I will come back with Benjamin, right? I'm placing my life as a pledge of his. My life is a guarantee of his. And Book of Proverbs is basically saying, dummy, you do that, you're in trouble, right? How do you ever get out of that? And the Midrash is going to nuance it, but reinforce it in some ways.
So Rav Hanina said, fly from three things.
That means keep away from.
Bailment, which is looking after someone else's possession.
It's not just like, looking after it, but it's like keeping it safe on behalf of someone else.
Interfering with an arranged marriage, and being a third party between neighbors.
Meaning when they have a dispute. Right, so you're basically saying you don't want to do any of these. Right? Someone says, do you mind watching my car while I'm gone? We might want to find someone else to do that. Someone else says, little Susie had an arranged marriage, and now that she's of age of maturity, we'd like you to talk to her about the arrangement and see whether or not she wants to go through with it. Is the type of the category they're talking about in the Midrash that just didn't fit on the page. You let someone else talk to little Susie about whether she wants to go through with the arranged marriage that was planned when she was young. And, your two neighbors are fighting. Do you want to go over and see if you can help them reconcile? Good God, no. Okay. However,
cleave to three things. Chalitza, to avoid levirate marriage, negating vows, and making peace between neighbors.
Okay, so chalitza is, as we talked about before, a man dies, leaving no heirs. The woman is intended to remarry, in Torah, the brother, in order to have a child that would be considered the child of the deceased. If the brother doesn't want to, or later under rabbinic law, that simply isn't allowed, you do a ceremony called chalitza, where there is a formal rejection of that union, and the woman is now free to marry anyone else that she wants, right? So it frees her up to marry someone else. Make sense? The negating of vows, this is when you've made a stupid vow, like, I won't eat until, my dog comes home, and then you find out the dog's been hit by a truck. You're going to want to cancel that vow, or else you're going to starve to death. And so there are ways to negate stupid vows, and you convene a Beit Din, a small tribunal, to do that. This is basically saying you should be willing and eager to be part of such a tribunal to negate a vow. And of course, making peace between neighbors is something that you should always be willing to do.
Doesn't that contradict what I just read 2 minutes ago?
Yeah, what is the difference
Yeah.
between that and being a third party?
Okay, so before we get to the being a third party and making peace, which is the springboard for the rest of our discussion, I want to see the parallels before the other parts, right? For negating the vows in the chalitza, and for doing bailment and the arranged marriage, right? So the arranged marriage is obviously a mirror to chalitza, and the bailment and negating vows, we're talking about releasing obligation, opening up opportunities rather than closing them generally. They're saying you don't want to ever be part of taking on responsibilities or closing doors, but being part of opening doors and opening responsibilities. That's much better, because when you have fewer responsibilities, there are fewer things to go wrong, right? Make sense? You see how those parallels sort of work? But then we come to one of these things is not like the other, but making peace and getting involved with other people's disputes would seem to be you can't do one without the other. But there are ways to be involved and ways to be involved, right? There are ways to be involved with someone else's dispute that help, and there are ways to be involved with someone else's dispute that don't help. And that's what we're going to look into, because what we have here with Judah is an example of becoming involved with a dispute that helps. Remember, at this point, he is not involved with the argument between the vizier and Benjamin. He's been cleared of everything. Joseph, the vizier, said, go home. Right? He is out of this discussion. He chooses to put himself back in. He steps up back into this argument and opens his mouth. And that's the most dangerous thing, because either he's going to make things worse or he's going to make things better. And that is a process that we call tochacha, of rebuke. When you see a problem and you need to voice your concern at the problem, you need to explain what you think is wrong. In Judaism, we call that tochacha. We call that doing rebuke. And it is a mitzvah, a really, really complicated mitzvah, because it sounds very simple if you look in Leviticus and Vayikra.
Do not hate your brother in your heart. You shall surely rebuke your neighbor and incur no sin because of this person.
Right? You shall surely rebuke your neighbor. right? If you see your neighbor doing something wrong, let them have it. Don't you know you're not supposed to be walking your dog in that area? Don't you know your trash cans aren't supposed to go out at this time? Don't you know that there's a sound ordinance in this area? Don't you know that you can't park on that side of the street on this day? Right? You got to rebuke people. Torah told me to. Right? Your stereo's too loud. You use bad language. I can't believe you let your kid ride the bicycle without a helmet. You should tell everyone everything they're doing that's wrong.
That's how you win friends and influence.
Exactly. That's how you win friends and influence people. Because everyone loves being told what they were doing was wrong.
This is how you started by saying families come together for these big dinners
and share their opinions.
Exactly like that.
Yeah. But the problem is the Torah does say rebuke. So what does our tradition do with this? How do we wrestle with the idea that we are commanded to rebuke? And also instinctually, I think all of us have learned through our years of life that is a really, really bad thing to have to do. How do we balance this? All right, ready to do the dance?
Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi says, a person should love rebuke, since as long as there is rebuke in the world, ease of mind comes to the world, good and blessing come to the world, and evil departs from it.
All right, so notice the first part of this. Who is supposed to love rebuke?
The person being.
Right, the rebukee. Right, not the rebuker, but the rebukee, the recipient of rebuke. If someone says, you put your trash cans out too early, you should appreciate that rebuke. You should love it. Why would Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi say that you should love someone else correcting you?
Because they want you to do the right thing. They want you to be on the right path. They want you to be a good person.
What they want comes in the second half. But there's a reason I believe that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi says that you should love rebuke even if you don't know what they want. Right? If a teacher hands you back a test and has all the mistakes marked on it, does it matter what the teacher wants for you? Or should you simply be appreciative that you now know what you did wrong,
Right.
and so you can fix it?
Right.
Right? That's what Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi is saying, is that if you hate rebuke, you will never improve. You will never get better. If you don't like being told you made a mistake, how will you ever notice your mistakes? Because we're really bad at noticing them ourselves. Remember we talked earlier about that whole self-justification and self-rationalization thing we do. We're not good at noticing our own mistakes. We need other people to tell us when we make mistakes. So the first thing you should do is cultivate a spirit of gratitude for other people pointing out your mistakes. Doesn't mean you have to like how they do it, and we're going to get to that. But the idea that someone would point out your mistakes as being a good thing, at least in the abstract, should be where we start. That should be our default position. Thank God somebody told me I was doing it wrong. You know the classic example, especially if you're a guy, we're really grateful when someone tells you your zipper's down. Right? Because if they don't tell us that, then we just keep walking around with our zipper down. And the one person who has the guts and come up and say, hey, check your zipper,
Yeah.
Thank you. Not you didn't embarrass me. All the other people out here who let me keep embarrassing myself, they're the problem. We like being corrected when we have the right attitude.
It often depends on who's doing the correcting.
Okay, yes.
If it's a person in authority, like a teacher, then you take it,
Right.
one way.
You're supposed to correct me.
If it's Joe Blow who really doesn't know anything, you feel that he's being arrogant and you're not going to take it as kindly as you would from the professor.
Right.
Well, I can't imagine that Ira would be very happy with my constantly saying to do this and do that.
In fact, we call that nagging. If you're constantly telling your spouse, you didn't do that, you should do this, you didn't do that, you didn't, yeah, exactly. So the question possibly could come for motivation or the spirit behind these words. And that really goes to the second half of this section from the Talmud.
Rabbi Yonatan said, whoever rebukes their neighbor for his own sake is worthy of a portion of the Holy One, blessed be he.
Right, so this is, lishma is the idea here when it says for its own sake. But they rebuke the other person not to show that they're better, not because they get a thrill out of pointing out other people's mistakes, not because it gives them a sense of power or control over someone else, not because it embarrasses them and everyone laughs, but they're doing it because they believe it's the right thing to let the other person know that there was a problem. Which means, let's see if I can diagram this. All right, we've got rebukee and rebuker, right? This is the and this is the E. Ultimately, it's not about that. What they're trying to say here is that for both, the rebuke is supposed to be this relationship, not this relationship. I'm rebuking you, right? I'm the because I have an obligation to heaven and I want to do what's right. And I'm going to frame it, as we'll see, in the proper way because that's what's in my heart and mind. I'm doing it for the right reason. And you listen to it in the right spirit because you are thankful that you have an opportunity to learn about something that you did that wasn't right, or to clarify that what you did was right, perhaps. And therefore you take it in the right spirit because it's coming through heaven rather than through the other person. So in a sense, it arcs up and comes down and is mediated by heaven in the meantime, in the middle. Does that make sense? Does that seem rather lofty? Yeah.
Well, it does, and you know, there's always the potential for the rebukee not to think they have done anything wrong and not accept the rebuker's premise.
Correct.
That it was wrong in the first place.
Exactly. Which is why it was so gutsy when Judah steps up to Joseph, right? Because what are the odds that the vizier of Egypt is going to say, "You got a point," and yet he did. But we're also going to learn that how he did is so important. Of how you do the rebuke to mitigate the chance that this person will, at least, even if they don't agree with the rebuke, they will still agree and be pleased that you said what you said. That ultimately is the trick, is to be able to offer a criticism or correction. Even if the criticism and correction is ignored, will still be appreciated. And that's hard.
Not only is it hard, I was just thinking, what if this were not Joseph that Judah was talking to,
Yeah.
but a real vizier, and he's trying to say to him, let me take the place of the boy that you're keeping. I'm trying to figure out how that would be accepted.
Well, I mean, I can imagine that, many viziers would probably have taken that much better than "you're wrong," or "he's innocent," or "how can you possibly do this," or "quick, get him," as being a solution to the problem. If we all rush him, there are 10 of us. But instead saying, I'm not going to say you're wrong, but I am going to ask for your compassion and your mercy on my father, not the boy who may be guilty, not me who's with the guy that's guilty, but on my father who will die. And I'm not telling you to give up on the punishment or the crime. I'm saying I will take its place. It's actually a very cunningly delivered speech, regardless of whether this is Joseph or not, and had probably the best chance of persuading a neutral vizier who didn't have it out for them to make him release Benjamin and keep Judah. I mean, Judah really, I don't think, was doing something here that was for his own benefit. He really was expecting to be kept as a slave. Okay, so let's go ahead and see more of our tradition as it begins to help us frame how we do this.
Rabbi Yossi ben Hanina said, a love without reproof is no love.
Right, so reproof is another synonym in English for rebuke. Think about that for a second. To love someone is to care enough to criticize.
That's what we tell our children all the time.
Exactly. I love you enough to nag.
I love you enough to show you what to do.
Right.
Teach you what to do.
And it's true. Now, again, this is not carte blanche to nag and criticize and nitpick on everything in the other person's life. Darn, yeah, I know. But the basic idea here is that rebuke is not the opposite of love. Right? Correction is not the opposite of love. It is an expression of it when done properly, right? When it's being aimed through heaven to the other person rather than like a fist straight across the table. It is supposed to be a fulfillment of your love and concern for the other person, which is one of the first things to try and remember when people ask you awkward questions or give you awkward advice at these family gatherings. They're talking to me because they care about me. They may be clumsy about it. It's kind of like someone who went over to get you a drink, and as soon as they bring it back to you, they spill it on you. They still wanted to give you a drink. They were trying to be nice. They're just not very good at it. And like I said, more of what this is going to go into is how to be better at giving the drink without spilling it in someone's lap. But to start, you have to understand it was intended with love, and that someone who says they like you and love you but has never offered a criticism in their life is not being 100% honest with you.
When my kids were little, it was just the start of the impetus for bike helmets before they were even mandated by law. And I used to tell them that, if we saw somebody that was riding without a bike helmet, I would say their mother doesn't love them enough. And the kids go, I know, you love us, that's why we have to wear these helmets.
And they did.
And they did.
Okay, onward.
Okay, so since a love without reproof is no love, Resh Lakish said, rebuke leads to peace. A peace where there has been no rebuke is no peace.
All right. Who here knows those sorts of situations? The tense calm in a room where no one is willing to point out the mistake or the problem or the elephant at the table, because they're just, let's just get through a peaceful dinner.
Yeah.
Right? We're just no one say anything about, what just happened. That's not peace. That's not shalom. Right? There needs to be an honest expression, tactfully put, as we'll see, but an honest expression of what is right or wrong with a current situation. And if you haven't done that, you're not actually at peace or at calm or in harmony with the other people around the table. You're just in a ceasefire. And that's not what we want. Make sense? Okay, onward.
Abraham came forward and said to God, will you sweep away the innocent along with the guilty?
Shows you how far rebuke can go up the chain. And by the way, the phrase Abraham came forward, Vayigash Avraham. It's the exact same word as Judah. Right? Judah stepped up before Joseph, and Avraham stepped up before God. And they both stepped up to offer very tactful but appropriate rebuke. Right? Because it looked like when God was about to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, that God was going to destroy the innocent along with the guilty. And then Abraham negotiated to make sure that that wouldn't happen. And we later found out, yes, there really were no innocent, but Abraham didn't know that. And so he offered rebuke. From his point of view, it looked like God was doing something wrong. And he very tactfully brought that to God's attention. And it was resolved very well between the two of them. It wasn't resolved so well for Sodom and Gomorrah because they lacked the good people, but at least it was resolved between God and Abraham. And you never saw God saying, how dare you question me?
And doesn't Moses do this similar to God when God wants to get rid of everybody? And he says, that they'll think you rescued them just so you can kill them in the desert yourself.
Moses challenges God's decisions on multiple occasions. Most famously, when at the golden calf, where God says, I'll wipe them out and I'll make a new nation with you. And he says, no.
Yeah.
But he does it well, and it resolves the situation well. Okay, so how do you do it well then, and how much do you have to do it? To the Sifra, to the Midrash.
How do we know that if a person has rebuked a neighbor 4 and 5 times, that person should continue to rebuke?
Right, you get it? You've told them about the trash cans every week for a month. Do you have to keep telling them?
Yeah.
Is it really a mitzvah to keep rebuking them? Yes, unless, and we're going to get to the unless.
Because it says, you shall surely rebuke the other.
Right. Emphasize the surely there. Right? And don't call me Shirley. That you surely will rebuke, not you'll rebuke and then you're off the hook. Bad, and then you walk away. You do have to repeat the rebuke over and over again. However,
one might infer that the reproof should be carried so far as to change a person's face with shame.
Right? You rebuke the person so bad or so loud or so publicly or so embarrassingly that they go red in the face or their face drains, they go white or pale. Right? I surely will rebuke. So I should surely do it to that level, right?
Thou shalt not kill.
But
it says, you shall not bring guilt.
Right. Now, in context, way back in our Leviticus quote, when it says you shall not bring guilt because of the person, you'll have no sin because of the person, we might have thought that was saying you have to rebuke them to avoid sin. And we are going to get a little bit of that idea later. But here it's saying you have to rebuke them in a way that isn't sinful. And it would be sinful to rebuke a person in a way that would humiliate, embarrass, or anger them. Right? You're not doing God's work by pointing out someone else's mistake, even if it's a serious mistake, if you do it in a way that humiliates, embarrasses, or angers them. Right? That's not rebuke. That's telling someone off. And that's not what the mitzvah is about. So you're seeing how we get to, again, reinforce this idea that you're not just laying into someone else. You are doing a very important sacred duty by pointing out a mistake, and that has to be how you think about what you're doing. And your ultimate litmus test is, let me see what his face is like. Because if he looks like he's getting really angry here, then I'm doing something wrong. Not just, oh, he's thin-skinned. It's, I'm not telling him the mistake well.
Rabbi Tarfon said, in this generation, there is no one capable of rebuking.
So that's what Tarfon says. You know what, actually, by this point, and Tarfon lived, in a pretty nice generation, he says, nobody knows how to do it. Right? Or no one is fit to rebuke. Meaning that, look, we're all so bad, who are you to tell me? Right? Or you just don't know how to rebuke me. And it will go bad. As soon as you open your mouth and say, it's going downhill from there. On the other hand,
Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, in this generation, there is no one capable of receiving rebuke.
Right? So where's the problem? Can I not rebuke you because I am lacking those skills? Or can I not rebuke you because you are lacking the skills of how to receive rebuke? Remember we said from Yehuda Hanasi that you're supposed to love rebuke. Well, no one loves it now, so therefore I can't give rebuke. So it's not that I can't give rebuke, it's just you can't take it.
That's right.
On the other hand, it could be, it's not that I can't take it, it's just no one ever corrects me well. Right? And I'm sure we've all seen examples of both of those problems, where maybe from personal experience, we've had a teacher or a mentor, someone that really knew how to point out all of our mistakes, and we loved them for it. Because every time they pointed it out, we felt we grew and we got better and stronger, and everything was wonderful, and we always knew they were only doing it for us. On the other hand, we may have had other people who, no matter how carefully we tried to phrase things and explain to them that there was a problem with something that needed to be covered, they took it to be the absolute worst thing ever. And it was like, just how could I have said that differently so that you would understand? Because I felt I needed to say something. That's what they're arguing about, is where does the fault really lie? And Rabbi Akiva says,
in this generation, there is no one who knows how rebuke ought to be worded.
Right. Ultimately, it's not about those who are fit to give rebuke or those who are willing to receive rebuke. It's about how you do it. And if you know the right way to say it, and that's not a simple thing, you can get your point across and preserve this proper relationship. Okay, so Proverbs is going to weigh on this again.
Reprove not a scorner, lest he hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you.
All right, so if someone is already a scorner, a scoffer, a rather disreputable fellow, Proverbs is saying don't bother, because your rebuke will only make him hate you. You might have thought, but wait a minute. What do I?
Who needs it most?
He's the guy who needs it most, and what do I care whether he hates me? What's important is I tell him what's what, right? And what's the saying?
Don't do that.
What's important is the change it will have on the person that is hearing. What's important is how the rebukee will respond. And if your speaking will make it worse, keep your fool mouth shut. Because it's not about you. It's not about you getting to lay down the law. What it is about this person fixing themselves and becoming better than they are. Which is why rebuking a wise person is always a good option, because they're going to take it great and run. That's where Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi gets his idea. Mary?
I think that what Edie said earlier is very true, depending upon who's doing the rebuking. If it's somebody that we respect, we're going to listen to it.
Exactly.
And if it's somebody that I feel is my equal or not quite my equal, I may not accept it very nicely.
True, or even less than the power relationship, it's often the feeling of the relationship of, do I think they respect me? Right? Because I can tell you that I've had teachers in my day that I didn't feel respected their students, myself included, and I didn't really care for their rebuke or their corrections. You know, I didn't care for what comments they wrote on my essays when they handed it back, because they didn't respect their students. They didn't really seem to care about us getting better at what we were doing. They were just marking papers. And I had friends that I would ask to look at papers and say, would you mind looking this over before I submit it? Because I really value your opinion, because you've shown that you care about me. And it didn't matter that they were my peer. They could take a red pencil all over it. But I respected them because they respected me. So it may not just be a power relationship thing. It's more of a, what do I believe their intention is? Do I believe they're doing this for me, or do I believe they're doing it for them? And Proverbs is saying here, you have to do it for the person, not for yourself. You don't just rebuke because you like to hear yourself complain. And further on, they go on to remind us.
A rebuke enters deeper into a man of understanding than 100 lashes into a fool.
Back in the days of flogging, right? You can either rebuke someone and point out their mistake, and they will take it to heart and they will change, or somebody who is a complete fool, and fool here doesn't just mean, you know, mentally deficient, it means morally deficient. You can whip them all you want, it's not going to make a bit of a dent in their behavior, right? So it's, how is the person going to take it is the ultimate measure, and how they take it will then determine whether you should open your mouth or not, which we're going to get now in the Mesilat Yesharim, which is from Ramchal, a later rabbi of the Middle Ages.
How often does a person rebuke sinners at the wrong time or in the wrong place so that they pay no attention to what is said? The rebuker is thus the cause of their becoming more confirmed in their wickedness and of their desecrating the name of God by adding rebellion to sin. In a case of this kind, it is the part of saintliness to remain silent. As it is our duty to reprove when we are likely to be heeded, say our sages, so it is our duty to withhold from reproof when we are not likely to be heeded.
Right? If you do rebuke at the wrong time and in the wrong way, you are making things worse. But that might argue for just always keep your mouth shut. And if you keep your mouth shut, then at least you haven't made things worse. Yes?
Well, not necessarily. You have made it worse if you allow it to go on.
Right.
Because you've never called it to someone's attention. They
Well,
could be doing it because they don't know any better, and you're not helping.
you're not helping, but at least you're not hurting.
Well,
I mean, it is very tempting, and I'm sure that all of us have gone through situations where we say, I can't believe they did that again. But, you know, if I say anything, it's just going to cause a scene, or they're going to take it the wrong way. I can put up with their loud music. I can put up with their trash can. I can put up with not wearing a helmet or whatever. I don't want to fight. You got to pick your battles, as people say, right? Yes, but that also is ultimately a recipe for inaction. And as we're going to see from Rambam's summary, inaction is action, and you are responsible for the consequences. And that's one of the reasons why why Judah speaks up on behalf of Benjamin, because inaction is sometimes really not an option.
One who rebukes another, whether for offenses against the one who rebukes him herself or for sins against God, should administer the rebuke in private, speak to the offender gently and tenderly, and point out that the rebuke is offered for the wrongdoer's own good, to secure for the other a life in the world to come.
Now notice that. You say not just if the person's done something that's, you know, bad against God or whatever, but they did something to you. Right? They backed into your car. They dumped trash on your lawn, whatever. When you rebuke them, you still have to be private, you still have to be tender, and you still have to be explaining that you're only doing this because you care about the person. Imagine the level of self-control and discipline required there. But also imagine the spirit that grows by conditioning yourself to make sure you're only opening your mouth with that in mind, even when it was something that was against you. Furthermore,
if the person accepts the rebuke, well and good.
Hooray!
If not, the person should be rebuked a second and third time. And so one is bound to continue the admonitions until the sinner assaults the admonisher and says, I refuse to listen.
All right, so you have to keep going until the person says, I'm not listening anymore. So there is a limit. And the limit by I'm not listening anymore is, if you're not listening, then my potential for help is gone. And therefore, I shut my mouth because I'm no longer helping you. I'm just making myself feel better by venting at you. And as soon as I do that, you're no longer the object of my goal, and I'm not allowed to treat you as just a punching bag for my anger or frustration. Even if you caused my anger and frustration, I'm not allowed to treat you as a punching bag for it. I can only explain to you the problem if you're willing to listen. Just think about that for a minute, about how important it is to have that in your mindset. That I'm not just getting this off my chest because I've got to tell you these things that you did that made me so upset. But before I open my mouth, the only reason I'm talking is because I want you to be better. I wouldn't phrase it quite like that, but that's what you should have in your mind. This person is doing something that is bad for them in their life, and I am a casualty of it, but they are the ones who need repairing. And if I can repair them, if my words will work, if I phrase it right, great. And if not, and if they tell me to shut up, then I guess I can't fix them. But that's the end of it. I still don't have to damage them. I don't have to get revenge on them. I don't have to be angry with them. My job here is being a mechanic. And if they slam the hood, then I put away my tools and go home. Make sense? Okay, because remember, they're broken, not me.
Whoever is in a position to prevent wrongdoing and does not do so is responsible for the iniquity of all the wrongdoers whom that person might have restrained.
Let's make sure we understand the sentence a little clunky.
Yeah.
If you are able to offer a rebuke, that is to say the person has shown no sign that they would not listen, and you could have said something, and you don't, you are liable for what that person goes off and does afterwards. Right? So that's the answer to, it seems like it's a lot easier just to keep your mouth shut and not make things worse. Yeah, but things could get worse tomorrow if this person keeps behaving in this way. You see someone mistreating their child, or whether it be verbally or physically, and you think to yourself, well, it's not my place to get involved or whatever. When that child gets hurt tomorrow, you're responsible. When that parent goes on to keep calling that kid stupid, you're responsible. If you could have said something and didn't, you're responsible. Now, if you say something and the person says, none of your business, get out of here, not if it's violence, but if it's, just they're being unhelpful with their child, then you do have to back off. If they're being violent with the child, then obviously that's a different level of involvement necessary. You are responsible if you could have said something and didn't. And that is a very big responsibility that we have to take seriously. Onward.
One who rebukes his fellow the first time, he must not speak harshly and humiliate him. We learn that no person may humiliate another, even more so in public, whether of low or high social status.
It doesn't matter whether you're the teacher, you don't get to embarrass the student. Doesn't matter whether you're the boss of the company, you don't get to embarrass the worker. Even if they did something wrong, you take them aside, you talk to them privately, you explain what it was, and you always keep in mind that you're only doing this for them, that you want them to be a better person, to be a better them. And by benefit, yes, you will avoid reaping the repercussions of their badness, but that's not why you're speaking. If it's a badness that needs immediate attention, that's what we have police for. Right? If someone is robbing a store, you don't do tochacha, you call the cops. Right? You don't do rebuke, you arrest them. But if someone is just doing something that is not ideal or not right and doesn't need that level of immediate stopping, you have to remember that you're doing it for them, not for yourself, no matter how angry or frustrated you are because of what they're doing. And that ain't easy. But if you don't think you can master that, then you better be really, really careful before you open your mouth. Question, comment?
I'm reminded of Harry's story on Sunday in his book about cutting the trousers and cutting his shorts.
Yep.
And the way his uncle handled it.
Yes. For those that, actually I look around, I think almost everyone was there, but he was relating a story where he was working with an uncle in a what do you call it, tailor, clothing manufacturing. And he was given the big power cutter for cutting multiple bolts of cloth at once, and he got it wrong. And so what should have been full-length trousers, now were shorts. And rather than coming over and saying, you stupid kid, you just ruined, however much worth of cloth, and I can't believe you, da, 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 da. It was like, okay, this is the way we do it to make sure that doesn't happen again. And gave a perfect example, exactly, of it was a big mistake, but the mistake was that the young man didn't know better and needed more instruction. And so he was given. And would clomping him up the ear make a difference? No. Just remember from Proverbs, rebuke will help the wise better than 100 lashes would help the stupid. Right? If they're not going to listen to you, hitting them in the head won't make them listen to you. And if they are going to listen to you, hitting them in the head doesn't make them listen better.
But make sure you're not just venting your temper.
Absolutely. Because there really is no point to just venting a temper to someone who's done something wrong. Trying to explain what's wrong, and sometimes stopping if the relationship's not going the right direction. Absolutely. You do have an obligation and an opportunity to explain what was wrong. But just venting? No. And certainly not publicly.
And one may only rebuke if he thinks that his friend will listen. If he knows that he won't listen, it is forbidden for him to rebuke him.
Because again, if you're rebuking someone that you know is not going to listen, you're only doing it for yourself, not for them. All right, and then finally, this is from the Baal Shem Tov, his final explanation of one way we can keep this in perspective, and you can take with this as you like.
I know that it is one of God's mercies that God brought this sight before your eyes in order to remind you of that fault in you, so as to bring you back in repentance.
Right. The only reason you're encountering this situation which needs rebuke is because of you. For example,
if you saw someone desecrating Shabbat or desecrating God's name some other way, you should examine your own deeds, and you will certainly find among them desecration of the Shabbat and cursing God's name. Or if you heard some profanity or obscene language, you should consider your own impudence and when you failed to conduct yourself modestly. If you heard some skeptical or atheistic talk from someone, then you should work to strengthen your faith and trust in God.
Right? And still rebuke them.
And still rebuke them.
So this is not let he without sin cast the first stone. This is, before you cast the first stone, know that you also do bad things. So that when you throw the rock, you're throwing it for the right reason. There was an execution issue, and we can go into the complication of the original story from the Christian Bible. But here we're talking about rebuke. When someone has done something that in front of you that you know is obviously wrong and needs rebuke, before you rebuke them, admit and accept, says the Baal Shem Tov, that you do it too. And that will tone your rebuke much better. Because when you see someone do something wrong, how could you possibly say such a horrible thing? Well, actually, come to think of it, when I remember last week when that guy got me so angry that I said something, but okay, so I understand why you said it, because I know that I say things like that too sometimes. And maybe I don't say them as often as I think you say them, but I know I do. And God is putting you in my position so I can see what it's like when I see someone else doing this. I still have to rebuke you because it is wrong, but while I'm rebuking you, I'm also rebuking myself, and we both grow from this. And hopefully I can now say it in a way that makes it sound like we're in this together, and I'm trying to help you rather than attack you. Make sense? All right, so I don't know whether you're on the receiving end of the awkward questions and comments at family gatherings, or whether you've been occasionally on the delivering end, but hopefully this will help you frame both how you take what people say, as well as what you say, so that people will take it the right way. And with that in mind, be good, and I'll see you all next week. Yes, we do still have class. No holidays falling on the Wednesdays during the next few weeks, so we're on for the next few weeks.
Good.
Oh, thank you. Where's my hat?